Ambience means space. It's like dead big, an encompassing, overarching environment, but also music to wash over you. Not forceful, but something you have to let build on you. Give it time and let it soak in. Not elevator music, but discerned by melody. This is a list generally of IDM albums where ambient and dance, house and electronic music collides. Not everything here is still and static ambient, but something with a bit of rhythm too. I've included some albums that are traditionally classified as ambient, and this is of popular artists, but 10 albums only means I've missed out loads I like, sadly. Put the listening effort in and reap the rewards. If you want to sign up to Patreon for advert-free videos, playlists, added comment and content for each review video, and lots of unique content too, only $5 a month for tier 1 to support my costs and full-time sustainability of this channel. The link is in the description field. The first one is a compilation, CD only available, 1995 down-tempo techno ambient album. It's got classics of all the masters of the genre, Moby's My Beautiful Blue Sky, Underworld's Dark and Long, and Sabres of Paradise. But it's chock full of lesser known tracks with swathes of ambient melodies and dark tones that make up lots of ambient music. Brian Eno, what can we say? Pretty much the king of this genre, and that's why he features twice. 4 slow-paced, melodic, orchestral, almost classical ambient tracks with utilitarian, lush melodies. This could be classified as an art music album with repeating patterns, but which is extremely relaxing. The first track with its piano scale repetition is like a musical metaphor for slowing down, which, if you were at an airport, well, I can see why it's probably titled as such. This album is an ambient down-tempo experimental album that uses orchestral, choral and atmospheric samples that can only really be described as a concept album. Maybe not as ambient, but I'm including it as the feeling is conjured here. Give it time and this is a real builder, and it's easy to gloss over this album as being over pretentious, for it's not. Some of the melodies are gorgeous, it's niche and a hidden treasure. It has such originality and it sounds like it would work as the backdrop to a medieval movie, knights on horseback riding through the English countryside. From the Gregorian chants of Admittance to the lovely melody-driven tracks like Grand Can. As a whole, this album works and I love it. You're unlikely to hear this with All the Same Old at a hi-fi show. This album is not what you'd associate with the KLF's rave acid house tracks like What Time Is Love, highly commercial at the time, a more subdued introspective album of ambient house music with loads of samples and chord lines. It leaves you thinking about peace, and it's so interspersed and segmented that it can take you somewhere different from each segment to the next. KLF took all their music off their catalogue in the early 90s. You can listen to this album on YouTube still, and some of the Amazon CDs look like old ones or pirates. Klaus Schulze's Timewind is a homage to Richard Wagner, but this 70s epic ambient avant-garde electronic album has all the texture of a Jean-Michel Jarre at his very best. On the opening Beirut Return, which is probably the best track of this album, the fast-paced synths melt with the high-frequency cricket-like sequencer patterns with long chords and air and wind samples. It's all there to take you to outer space. This album is maybe to be used for stress reduction and clinicians taking on patients, hypnotic too. For reasons of taking you somewhere else, this is why this album is so good. Klaus Schulze was one of the members of Tangerine Dream, of course, and is regarded as one of the founding fathers of electronic music. This is a terrific album. This come down type album is a classic within the spheres of people who appreciate it. This being the Orb's first album, Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld is a mesmeric, ambient, dub, techno and house album with such influences but infused with atmospheric samples of dialogue, radio broadcasts and all sorts of sounds. Also, it's so trippy with the tracks like A Huge Pulsating Brain That Rules from the centre of the Ultraworld, with well-known Minnie Riperton's Loving You track, but it also has more dub-focused poppy tracks like Perpetual Dawn or Little Fluffy Clouds that many people know of. It's best appreciated by people who understand what goes into a really good ambient album like this. And whilst it may show signs of its age now, this was probably the album to popularise the ambient house movement. Easily the best album from BOC, this ambient techno album from '98 put this Scottish brother duo on the map. The characteristic USP is of long, lush, analogue sounding ambient chords sitting with really fast-paced digital electronic inflections and rhythms. This analogue synthiness makes this album inwardly nostalgic and connoting feelings of an environment, and you can put it on as a grower ambient techno music album, letting all those melodies wash over you. This album consists of music written for a documentary about NASA's Apollo missions in the 60s and 70s. I'm putting it here because as a pure ambient album, stirring feelings of the darkness and weightlessness of space, some of the melodies on this album are terrific. Nobody could dislike the ethereal and hugely melodic tracks on this album like Unending Ascent or the track Deep Blue Day that gets an airing in the Trainspotting film in the scene when Ewan McGregor swims after diving into the toilet. Moving to ambient house and techno from '91, this is in my top 10 favourite electronic dance albums and I've always mentioned it. Trip hoppy acid house percussion with warm lush melodies and tones inflected with folkish guitars, it's quintessentially British electronica. It also has jazzy influences like the track Saratoga. I think it's up there with some of the best stuff from the Orb, Arteca and Underworld. It never dates and it's a fun album and I just love it. Taking the club beats and sounds from techno and acid house rave culture around the time it was made, this album is awash with ambient underlying chords, much the same way Boards of Canada do things that way. But its difference is it's more like true techno taken down a bit in a true ambient chill out way. And I think this album probably invented this ambient techno genre and it appeals as IDM too. An absolute classic, and it tends to be always regarded as one of those best ambient albums of its time, which I totally agree with and based on how many people like it too. I've had this album on repeat so many times since the 90s when I bought it. I hope this little video got people into finding some albums that they've never heard. Remember to sign up to Patreon where I put some of my favourite tracks of these albums into Spotify, Tidal and Quobuzz playlists. Also from ambient albums I've missed.